Well, welcome in, everybody. I wish I could laugh about this. I can't. It's serious. I'm not happy. Rockets fall in overtime, 133 to 128 in New Orleans against the Pelicans. Uh, really a staggering. I'm here with the great Ben DuBose. You can follow him on Twitter at Ben DuBose, and you can read his writing at USA Today and on Rockets Wire on USA Today and on ClutchFans. As I mentioned, Rockets lose in overtime 133 to 128 in a game that they had a 25-point lead at least six times. And just dominated the first half, where at the very beginning of this game, it looked like, oh, maybe the Pels are going to make a game of it, hit three quick threes, and then just the Rockets laid waste to this team in the first half. And they got a combined, I believe it was 22 of 29 or 23 of 29. I'm going to go double check my math. Shooting from Kevin Durant and Amen Thompson, and they lose on the road after 2 days of rest to the New Orleans Pelicans. Ben, I'm just going to let you get a crack at this because I'm sure you got a lot to say.
Yeah, that was incredibly disappointing to lose a 25-point lead in the second half to a 5-22 team. But really, it fits with what we've seen since the calendar turned to December. And I think some of the talking points after the Denver loss the other night have missed the mark. Like, I understand why we're talking about the officiating. That was really bad. And I understand why it's frustrating to lose another close game. But all this talk about, oh, can they close out games against good teams? They're 0-5 against top tier teams in the West. Well, no, they actually offensively made some really tough shots against the Nuggets and fought back. The issues were defensively. Going into tonight, their overall rating in December was 10th, which is well down from the season overall. They were 7th on offense, a little bit down. They were 13th on defense. That's where the slippage really was. And tonight they let the Pelicans shoot about 75% for the second half. That's staggeringly bad. And now we're 7 games into December. They're 3-4. So no, it's not just tip your hat to Denver or blame the officials because that was really bad in fairness, but that's just one game. Like, they have a losing record this month, and this is a team that going into December was on a 60-plus win pace, that had the second best net rating, I think the fifth best in NBA history entering this month, and they just have not looked right the entire month. And we can sit here and make excuses. The first two losses were Utah and Dallas on night two of back-to-backs, and I know they were shorthanded. Şengün had an illness in there as well. But even with those factors, they shouldn't have been down 15, 20 points midway through the third quarter to teams like Utah and Dallas. I mean, worst case, those games should be close. You shouldn't be getting blown out 30 minutes into the game. And then even the games at home that they've won, the Kings were up by 7 midway through the third quarter. The Kings are terrible. The Clippers took them down to the wire. The closest thing to a complete game they had was the win over the Suns, who were missing Devin Booker and Jalen Green. And even that one, the Rockets were down by 9 early in the second quarter. The Rockets this month, they just have not played a complete game. And that's what, to me, tonight is just a perfect microcosm of. Yeah, they looked really good the first 24, 27 minutes, but they just cannot put 48 minutes together. They do not have that consistent defensive intensity that they did a season ago. And once you let go of the rope, it's tough to get it back. And so this loss is the worst of them all because you had rest, you had a 25-point lead on the road against a terrible New Orleans team. Yeah, it's a really bad loss, but I think it's more than just 1 out of 82. It's a perfect microcosm of what they've been since the calendar turned to December. It's frustrating, and there will be a temptation to look at the final possessions and where things went wrong. And I certainly think Kevin Durant should get more shot attempts late in games than he did
Yeah.
in this one.
Yeah.
When, say what you will about the Pelicans double teaming him, but when KD in the last minute of overtime decided, screw it, I'm going to shoot no matter what, he got an easy dunk and he got fouled on a three, where even though it was a tough shot, the Pelicans panicked because it's Kevin Durant and he gets 3 free throws, and that's what gave the Rockets a chance. To me, the bigger story is this team defensively. It looked like going into this month they had figured it out. At one point, they were ranked second in the league, but right now, I don't know what you want to attribute it to, Dave. They don't have Dylan and Fred. I think that intensity is missing. Maybe it's that, they lost Tari midway through November and you could survive it a week or two, but then, eventually some of the guys get worn down. I don't know. I'm open to explanations. I guess you can say they're trying to to scale up Reed Sheppard and year two small point guard. He's, limited on that side. But I mean, tonight Reed barely played down the stretch of the game, and they still got abused defensively. So I
Yeah.
don't know what it is, but it's a problem.
Yeah, and it's definitely not a one guy thing. I mean, obviously, I think they're still in the top five. I have to take a look. Top
I think
five
they're fifth.
defensively. Yeah, I mean, there's a huge gap between one and everyone else, but still, they're up there. So I don't want to say it's been terrible all year, but like tonight, it was absolutely terrible in the second half. Jabari was extremely active, but he was getting, they were scoring on him certainly a lot. It wasn't just Jabari. I'm not singling him out. I promise. But Jabari also did not have a good shooting night by any stretch. I think he was 5 of 18. Double checking here. But a lot of it, frankly, to me is you're missing Dylan in the sense that he covered for a lot. I mean, you're seeing a huge gap right now. Look, I know Şengün fans are going to get upset when I say this, but you take a look at Şengün's on-off, and it's a huge difference defensively when he's in and when he's not. He's been amazing this year. He's a clear all-star, so I want to make sure that that's clear. But that's part of it. I think that can get rectified over time because he's shown it last year that he can be part of that system. And I'm not throwing him under the bus for today at all. I thought it was across the board, but it was definitely defensively because they could not stop anybody in that third and fourth quarter. And I think it was really frustrating to me was, they probably should have lost the game, yet had two clear, wide open looks from Reed Sheppard. One was just staggeringly wide open, the first one, and he just missed it. And then Şengün got the board, gave it back to him, and set the screen to clear him off the corner, and he missed that one too. I was just like, oh, he's got this. He's going to tie the game. The way the Rockets played in the second half, they deserve to lose. Maybe this wakes them up. But to me, it was defense. That was the number one story. But the number two story is closer and getting that ball to KD. I mean, even coming into this game, I was just surprised to see that in the clutch time moments this year, Şengün has taken more than twice as many shots as Kevin Durant. Now, that's no shade on Şengün. Şengün does a good job, and you want Şengün to have the ball because he's probably your best playmaker, passer. But to not have Kevin Durant shooting the ball, and this is on KD in a lot of ways. And I think that, he's got to step up. You noted it, Ben, when we were talking live or, during the game in real time, that wow, suddenly when they were down 4, he just got real aggressive with the ball and they suddenly made some headway. He's got to call for the ball. I don't know if this is like the mama bird feeding the baby birds. Like, hey, I want to give Şengün his opportunities. I want to give Jabari his opportunities. I want to give Amen, a shot as well, because you do want that long term down the line. That is, but that's closing time. That's what KD's getting paid the big bucks for, and you want him taking those shots.
Well, and I also question the coaching a little bit because I thought when this game got really tight, the Rockets were leading by 4-6 points for most of the fourth quarter, and then where New Orleans went from, down by a couple of possessions to pretty much a 50-50 game was that stretch when Şengün picked up his 5th foul, and the Rockets played 3+ minutes without Şengün and without Reed Sheppard. And KD hit a couple of mid-range shots, and then the Pelicans started trapping him earlier in the clock. And those possessions were awful, Dave. Like, Amen had the one near the end of the game, but other than that, Amen was not doing much late in the game when he got those one-on-one situations. Şengün wasn't on the floor. Reed wasn't on the floor. And so who's going to create your offense in those situations? If you don't have Şengün, and I understand if you want to say it's 5 fouls, well, put Reed in there, but you need someone. And that's why I do give Reed a little bit of a pass. Now, it is frustrating. I said on Blue Sky, as soon as the game ended, you can't be more Houston sports hashtag than getting your generational shooting prospect 2 wide open looks at tying threes and then planking them both. Well, Reed hadn't played in 30 real-time minutes at that point. So if he's a little rusty, I sort of understand it. It sort of felt like the coaching staff was indecisive. Midway through the fourth quarter, there was a stretch when Reed was at the scorer's table, and then he was pulled back, and it seemed like Ime couldn't decide if he wanted to roll with the defensive lineups or if he wanted to go offense. We know they closed with Reed, and that was sort of odd that they didn't close with Reed tonight because in Denver they did, and it worked really well. With Reed at the point, they got some really good looks late in that game, and if not for that bizarre foul call with the men and Tim Hardaway Jr., the Rockets probably win that game.
Yeah.
And so it was really odd that they had Reed at the scorer's table. It's like they saw the need and then pulled back. And so I sort of understand if he's a little rusty for that final possession in overtime. But then, yeah, at the end of regulation, it's like if the Pelicans are going to double KD and trap him that aggressively, and you don't have the personnel to attack and make them pay on the backside, then what's going to change? And then, like, you adjust the personnel, at least to an extent, you bring back Şengün, and yet KD is still deferential. It just seemed very inconsistent. It seemed very random. It felt like there was a point in overtime that KD finally said, "F it, I'm just gonna go shoot," and that's when the Rockets nearly came back and won that game. But I don't know. The real story is letting a game you led by 25 get close in the first place. The defense we've been talking about, but the crunch time, I thought it was strange from KD. It was also strange from the coaching staff. Quite frankly, it just felt like there was just a lot of indecision all the way around. That's what Craig Ackerman and Ryan Hollins said in the broadcast when there were a couple of times in the drives inside that Şengün and Amen, it felt like neither one of them knew when they wanted to shoot, even when they were relatively open. It just felt like all the way from KD, Şengün, Amen, and all the way to Ime Udoka. And Dave, I've got to get in one more rant before I hand things back off to you. I hated seeing Ime get into it with Derek Queen when the clock was running out in overtime. Let Derek Queen celebrate. That's a hell of a win to come back from 25 down against a so-called contender. I mean, we hope they're a contender. They sure as hell don't look like one now, but that's a really good win for the Pelicans. And at some point, turn the frustration to your own locker room. The other night, I sort of understood the press conference going after the officials, and me, I'd be the ultimate hypocrite if I said don't go after the officials. But
Yeah.
That's a one-off. Tonight, I don't care what happened. You lost to a 5-22 team when you led by 25. I don't want to see you chewing out the other team. Chew out your own team. There's a million guys you could pick on for that game going wrong, and that's just it's time running out. I'm not trying to say it's representative of Ime Udoka because I'm sure he's going to light into them post game. I'm sure they'll have a practice tomorrow leading into that rematch in Denver on Saturday. So it's not to say that he doesn't have other opportunities to light into his team, and I hope and trust that he will. But right now, for me, Dave, it's sort of like the other night. I understand why the storyline was about the officiating. It was really bad. It was on the worst I've ever seen. Tonight, I don't want any talk about, were the Pelicans showboating too much? No, the Rockets need to be absolutely furious with themselves. They had no business losing that game.
Yeah, they can. They deserve to talk a little bit of trash after the Rockets collapse like that. Just to go over a couple of the numbers of the game. I know if there's a few questions in the chat that I want to address. The Rockets dominated the glass 72-48. They still got 107 shots up to their 97. There were two reasons, in my opinion, aside from the defense, of course, because the Pelicans, that's the primary reason. But as far as offense, matching their offense, the three-point shooting, Rockets just 10 of 32, 31%. Pelicans shot almost 41% from three. And turnovers. I mean, the Rockets had 18 turnovers in this game, 6 by KD, 4 apiece by Jabari and Amen, 2 by Şengün. But that's really just kind of minor. Really, it was KD, Amen, and Jabari coughed it up. I mean, Jabari, look, I love Jabari. He had a bad game, front, offense and defense. I thought he missed open shots, took a lot of shots. They were the ones given to him. I don't think he forced very much. Did not like the game that he played today. It was somebody had asked in the chat, can we talk about Şengün and the three-point shooting? Yeah, Şengün's 1 for 17 from three in his last 7-8 games or so. Hasn't been able to hit the three. Since his 5 of 8 performance in the first game against OKC, I believe he's back under 30%. In other words, taking out that first game and the rest of the season, he's under 30% now. I don't know if it's fatigue or what. As a matter of fact, when it comes to Şengün has been putting up huge numbers and deserves a lot of accolades for that. But when it comes to Şengün, last 10, 12 games, I don't know what it is. I don't have a theory. I don't know what to tell you. But the plus minus is not moving the needle when he's out there. And then not tonight, because it started that way in the first half, but in the second half, they started to slip when Şengün was off. but it's been that way. I think in the last 10, 12 games overall, his plus minus is negative. It's bizarre. It wasn't that way last year at all. It wasn't that way before this stretch. So I don't know if he's got tired legs or what it could be. He's putting up numbers, taking a lot of shot attempts, but the team's not feeling the overall net impact when he's out there.
And I also don't think for the month as a whole that Steven Adams has been the Steven Adams that we're used to. And so I think it's a double whammy. You know, the Rockets' superpower is their rebounding, it's their physicality. And the two big men have just not been themselves this month. You know, Steven was a little bit better tonight, although one more nitpick I've got to get in on the coaching, Dave. I thought it was very odd when the Pelicans tied it on those two queen free throws with 9 seconds left. The
Yeah.
Rockets had a couple of timeouts, didn't use one, and so they gave it to Şengün. And yet, when Şengün drove to the basket, Dave, I'm sure you noticed it was Steven Adams, defender, that came over and made it to where it was almost an impossible shot for Şengün. And not saying Şengün wouldn't have gotten a second defender no matter what, but if you have a spacer there and you also have Kevin Durant on the court, then it's much easier for Şengün to get a true one-on-one opportunity, the way he did the other night in Denver when Reed Sheppard was on the floor closing out the game instead of Steven Adams. Now, overall, I think Steven had 10 boards tonight and he was a little better. But the reason I bring up Steven in regards to your larger point that it's not about tonight. So the three losses before this one that the Rockets had in December, two of them Steven didn't play. The two in Utah and Dallas on night two of back-to-backs, which, no, you don't get to say it's just because night two of back-to-back when you're down 20-ish points midway through the third quarter to bad teams. I'm sorry. Like, we can say it's not the end of the world, but it's a bad performance nonetheless. And then the game the other night in Denver, Steven played 16 minutes. He had 0 rebounds. I'm sorry, that's not a good showing.
Yeah.
I know Jonas Valanciunas played relatively well, and I'm sure there's tactically some things Denver did, but I suspect Steven would be the first to tell you that he should never play 16 minutes and have 0 rebounds.
I wonder if he
And
ever has before in
yeah,
his life, in his career. I have to go check that.
That's a good question. And so the reason I bring that up is to say, yeah, like Şengün's efficiency has nosedived of late, and he didn't deliver in the clutch tonight. But in these losses in December, it's sort of been a double whammy in that it's not like Steven, well, two of the losses, he literally hasn't been available. And overall, he just hasn't been as impactful, period. And so if you take away that massive advantage in rebounding and physicality, you know, the two star level impact big men that it looked like they had to start this season, then that's when you go from a really good team to just the blah version that we've seen since the calendar turned to December. And so, again, just to be clear, that's not blaming Steven for tonight. I thought he was a little bit better in that final possession. That's not on him. If he's on the court and the Rockets don't call timeout, then sure, his man, especially if Steven goes to crash the offensive glass, is going to help on Şengün. If Şengün drives inside, it is what it is. That's not his fault. But the month as a whole, yeah, you're right. Şengün has regressed, but quite frankly, so has Steven. And so what you get is a Rockets team that's still good, but they don't have the superpower. To go back to what you said in the past, Dave, they don't have that superpower that they did the first 6 weeks of the season.
Yeah, and their record right now, 16-8, I believe, matches where they were exactly last year, and they have a tough stretch coming up as well. I will say this, if I'm looking for a silver lining, I mean, Reed in the second half had some bad moments. The second half was bad for a lot of players. I did think Reed played pretty well in the first half. Like, we were watching this going, wow, he's had some good point guard moments. At least I thought, noticed that he did have 7 assists tonight without a turnover, 11 points, but just 4 of 12 shooting, 3 of 10 from 3, none bigger than the the 2 at the very end that were wide open that could have tied the game. As far as free throws, that was huge because Ime mentioned this in post game. He said they made their free throws, referring to Derek Queen. I believe he made 4 clutch free throws.
Yep.
We did not. Adams missed 1 of 2, I believe, in the clutch.
Şengün went 0 of 2.
And then Şengün, with 44 seconds left with the Rockets up 2, missed both, which is frankly unlike him. Just yeah, I don't know what to say about that. Usually you can count on Şengün for at least 1 or 2. But yeah, go ahead.
We've also got to talk about the Tari Eason situation. Like, sorry to take this beyond just this game, but what we learned pregame that it's not the oblique, but now he's struggling with the shin again. Dave, I'm sorry, that's a red flag. You know me. I said as soon as Tari suffered the oblique strain, the reactions, some of them are over the top. There's no such thing as injury-prone people, but there are such a thing as chronic injuries. And this is the 3rd season in a row, going back to And I'm assuming it's, I think they would have clarified if it wasn't the same shin. I'm pretty sure they would have clarified. And so for them to, they didn't say left or right, but I think it's pretty implicit that this is the same issue that he's had the last couple of years when, 2 years ago he had the stress fracture. And then in March of 24, he had surgery, tried to come back last year, missed an entire month midway through the year, couldn't play back to backs. He said he was feeling much stronger going into this season. And I am inclined to believe that, maybe this is a situation where because of the oblique, he wasn't really keeping up with his conditioning over the past month. And so maybe the last week or so, as the oblique has all the way healed, he hasn't gotten the ramp up period that he did in training camp and in the preseason. But the fact that it's an issue at all, the fact that we're now in his third season since that stress fracture, since that, I mean, it's terrible for Tari. I'm certainly not blaming him, but I'm just speaking to, the predictive value.
Dollars. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that, certainly the contract, it probably played into those negotiations. It could again next summer, but just in the context of this season, if you read what Ime said pregame, he said they hope to get him back within the next few games. Dave, that's a pretty vague quote. That doesn't sound like to me that they're expecting him to return 2 days in Denver. They're not ruling it out, but saying we hope that he's back within the next few games. That's very different than last Saturday when he blew us away at practice and said that, yeah, they're anticipating, Tari playing Monday night in Denver. Well,
Yeah.
now it's almost a week later and they're hoping within the next few games. So it's not Tari's fault. He's working his butt off. It all traces back to just an unfortunate incident in the 23 preseason. But I mean, if it's the third season in a row that this is apparently still an issue, it's worrisome. I mean, I'm not going to
Yeah.
say that it's going to be like crushing for his season or career, but it's not nothing either. It's not a random one-off like the oblique was. I guess that's the way I'll put it.
Yeah, if I'm going to trust Rafael Stone for anything, obviously at this point I trust him for a lot as far as building this team. But I mean, his contract management has been unbelievable, and I think he's wise to play a little bit of hardball here with whatever figure they have because he hasn't been available. I mean, I noticed that comment that was just made about Zion playing more games than Tari the last 3 seasons. I really don't know if that's true. I have to go take a look at that, but. He hasn't been available, and he's a really good player. You need Tari Issa on this team. He's chaos. He creates a lot of problems for the opposing team. Tonight,
and he's the hedge for Jabari and Amin. Like that's not to let Jabari and Amin off the hook. Now Amin was very good for the game overall, but he struggled down the stretch. Jabari, as you mentioned a couple of times, was underwhelming the whole way through. It felt like, but if either of those two guys has a bad night, Tari's the hedge. Well, now you don't have the hedge, and so it just sort of compounds the issue where if one of those guys has a bad night, then what else can the staff really do? And so it's not just missing Tari, what he provides, the 25 minutes or so off the bench, but you also don't have the insurance policy if one of your big guns doesn't have it going on.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm with you 100%. I mean, they're 0-2 now on this 6-game road swing leading up to the Christmas Day game against the Lakers. The funny part about this is we had this chaotic game against the Nuggets, and who's on deck? Denver. At Denver, again, they go right back to the scene of the crime, and that's where they're going to be playing on Saturday. I mean, you can exercise these demons right away, get all this out, but that's a really, really tough team, even with some of their injuries. I don't know if Peyton Watson – I didn't follow up on his injury situation. I don't know if he'll be available on Saturday, but they've got to get this taste out of their mouths because this is just a terrible, terrible second half performance. And I do think that there are some flaws here. I will say the Pelicans, we talked about this on Monday after the game, that this was a bit of a trap game because they've been playing much better since Borrego took over as coach. They, I think, were second in the league in pace. And at the very beginning of the game, I thought, this could be a recipe for a problem for the Rockets. Just with Herb Jones defending KD. We've talked about this in the past. Like really physical defenders can give KD issues. Yet he's 7 of 7 shooting in the first half. Go ahead.
But look how I know you have to tip your hat to Herb a little bit for what he did in the second half when he turned it around. But look what happened on his 6th foul. All KD has to do, even if it's a contested shot, he's Kevin Durant. He strikes so much fear into the heart of these defenses that even if it's a bad look, there's a decent chance he's going to go to the line for 3 free throws just because he is that feared in the clutch. And so it's not as easy as it sounds. I'm sure, to your point earlier on the mama bird analogy, I'm sure he would have loved to see Şengün or Amin get that dagger bucket to win a close game, which the Rockets haven't done enough of this season. But some of it, I mean, even if the looks aren't good, just try, just put it up. And I mean, he's 7 feet tall and one of the best shooters in NBA history. Maybe he makes it anyway, or more likely, maybe he just gets fouled because teams are that damn paranoid of him. But I know what you're getting to. Like, Herb Jones is a great defender, and he did work in the second half tonight. But I do think some of it, whether you blame the coaching staff, Kevin Durant, or both, just trust him. Just give the guy a chance, and it would definitely be better than what they did alternatively tonight. Let's put it that way.
It's a good question. I don't have the answers to that. I think their goal is to say, hey, get the ball in the hands of the guy that can create the best with Fred out. Meaning, okay, as far as the best semblance of a point, and meaning Şengün. And so he can either try to score or create. Now, Şengün has not been efficient in the clutch this year. He's probably 45 to 50% true shooting in the clutch, but he has created and made passes. So I think that they're thinking, okay, he can play off Şengün and get KD the ball. They're certainly paying a lot of defensive attention to KD. But I think this is going to become, after this game, a heavy focus of the coaching staff is get the ball to Kevin Durant. Go ahead.
Yeah. By the way, there's a comment in the chat that I want to highlight that sort of dovetails with what you and I were talking about during the game. Even then, the Rockets were kind of lucky in the first half. The Pelicans missed a ton of open shots that they were making in the second half. You and I talked about that in the first half. The Pelicans got a lot of good looks and just clanked them. And then in the second half, they went in. And so, big picture, I'm not saying we're there yet, because even though this month has been awful, look, 16-8, it's not like the end of the world. It's not like they're that far off the spreadsheet. But let's play this out. Like, let's say that they have some flaws, that, you know, this team just isn't as close to the top tier contention as we wanted to think going into the year. I'm not personally saying I'm all the way there yet, but, you know, this is a bad loss. I get why people are going to panic. This is not a fun week to be a Rockets fan. So let's play this out. In the worst case scenario, at a bare minimum, I would feel better about it if they were developing Reed Sheppard. Like, one of the real silver linings for me out of that Denver game, as frustrating as it was, like, Reed played really well down the stretch of that game, including the 2 big threes in the fourth quarter, one with a minute left.
Yeah.
Tonight, I know he had the 2 looks at tying threes, but I think you sort of have to put an asterisk on that after sitting for at least 30 minutes of real time. What's frustrating to me is that it felt like, you know, Ime wanted to go back to Reed, then pulled back for the sake of having a defensive lineup. Only the defense was terrible the whole time. It was terrible, shredded in the second half, with and without Reed Sheppard. Quite frankly, it was shredded in the first half too. The Pelicans just missed the shots. So it's sort of like, if they're not good enough anyway, then at least try and develop Reed Sheppard, who we all know at some point. I'm not saying that, you know, that Kevin Durant's over the hill, but at some point in the next, you know, the longest possible time frame, I'll say at least in the next 3 or 4 years, at some point, KD is going to age out. It happens to everyone. Father time does not stop. And so the reason we were sort of bullish on not just this season, but the whole, you know, generation of the Rockets, is that as KD ages out, your young guys can progressively take on more and more responsibility and step up into bigger roles. Well, the one guy as an offensive engine that showed perhaps the most upside, not consistent upside, but upside, would be Reed Sheppard. And now he's sitting on the bench at the end of this game, all while the Pelicans' young guys are going out there and making plays. Yeah. And so that's what makes it doubly frustrating for me, Dave. It's like, I understand that Reed, year 2, is going to be a defensive liability, but you're sitting him and then you're getting shredded defensively anyway. And so it's sort of like, I could swallow the losses a lot more, even bad losses, if at least Reed Sheppard was out there, and maybe it's like, okay, then even if it doesn't pan out, maybe this is, you know, I don't want to say next gen Steph Curry, because that's unfair to him, but like a potential, you know, all-star level player that you're developing. But when you're going with defensive lineups that aren't performing defensively, when the doubles and traps are so aggressive on KD that he can't get off a shot, and then your other guys are so limited offensively that you can't do anything out of 4-on-3 scenarios, that's where it's just really frustrating, because it's like, what do you do well? What are you doing well, both short-term and long-term? What positives do you take out of this game? Like, I understand it's one game, 82-game season, all that stuff, but I guess to bring the pod full circle, it's not one game. They're 3-4 in December. They've lost to not just New Orleans, but Utah and Dallas as well. Like, this is not a one-off. These are real trends that have been happening for a while. It's not the end of the season. It's not that they can't turn them around, but it's
Yeah.
not nothing either. It's not one of 82. These are real issues.
Yeah, and those, the Dallas and Utah losses were second game of back to back. You were missing Adams. I think Şengün was out for one of those games. I'm not going to make excuses. I just did, but I'm not making excuses for the losses in those games. But tonight is the worst loss of the season, bar none.
Yeah. I'd say it's the worst of the Ime Udoka tenure.
It might be. There have been some clunkers. I remember some road games, but you're right with expectations where they are. And
Up
I
25
think,
in the second half on a 5-22 team. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's just watching down the stretch. Sometimes it just feels this way. It's not this way, but it feels like, well, why'd you get Kevin Durant? You're still rolling with Amen and Şengün first, and then Amen, after that in the clutch. There's just a little bit of frustration with that. I think they'll get it ironed out, but yeah, this is a tough loss, and now you go right back to the fire pit, basically, in Denver. You're going to face Jokic again. You're going to face Murray. That was a nasty game, tough game. Should have won the game for obvious reasons. We've discussed all that. And now they get another crack at it. Anything you expect differently in this game? Maybe Tari's back for this one. Let's hope, knock on wood. That would make a difference for the Rockets. Denver, of course, is missing several key defensive guys as well. I wouldn't just say just defensive guys, but Brown, Gordon, and possibly Watson.
By the way, Dave, to wrap up the pod, an amazing social media post that I meant to reference earlier because I changed out my Rockets hat for a Texans one right before we started recording for this reason. Jason Williams, longtime ClutchFans user, you know him as Astro Rocket, posted this to Blue Sky. I'm far more confident watching the Texans right now than the Rockets. This was unfathomable a month ago. It's crazy to think about, but it's true. Like, we recorded, I remember when the Rockets had that thrilling win in Milwaukee on a Sunday afternoon in mid-November. I remember making the joke that the Texans beat the Jags, rallied behind Davis Mills just to ruin their draft pick positioning, thinking that the Texans were playing for draft positioning at the time. Now they've won 6 in a row and they look like, a legit contender.
Yeah.
And the Rockets, I'm not going to say they've fallen off the map. 16-8 is not the end of the world, but it's a reminder of just how quickly things can change for better or for worse. So at least you have the Texans.
And if I could just wrap it up with a bow and put a silver lining on it, I will say we've seen this in the NBA a lot where teams will go through lulls and then they'll go hit a stretch, even if it's a tough schedule, and just wreck shop. And maybe they'll get this ironed out and figured out. I mean, look, I'm not all the issues we just discussed, they're real. I'm not ignoring them. I'm just saying that this was, I don't know how to explain some of the malaise. I'll just also, I didn't mention this. Jabari had a lazy pass in the third quarter, I believe it was, that I thought shifted some things too. Not the whole game, wasn't the reason for it, but tried to throw it, I believe, to KD. They scored in transition. He dunked over Jabari. No taunting call, which was a bit of a shock. Then I think the Rockets either turned it over or didn't score, and then they scored again before the quarter. There was just some plays. That was just highlighting one of many that in the second half, they just seemed disconnected. Like I said, they're going to go right back into the fire against Denver. So hopefully this is ironed out rather quickly.
By the way, once you get through the Denver game, the schedule after that, now some of these are on the road, but Kings, Clippers, Lakers, Cavs, Pacers, Nets, Mavericks, Suns, Trailblazers twice, Kings, and Bulls. So on paper, as bad as things look now, you're about to enter a stretch where you're favored almost every game. That's the glass half full view. The glass half empty view, they were favored by a lot tonight, and we saw the result.
Yeah, absolutely. Ben, appreciate you doing this. I know we went a little long tonight. I appreciate everybody joining us on a game which wasn't the most exciting to recap for sure, but we'll be back Saturday night. Rockets will play the Nuggets, and let's hope they don't fall 0-3 to Denver this season. Thanks, everybody. Have a good one.